So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the International Society of Military Sciences Annual Conference 2020. On behalf of the Finnish National Defense University, I wish to thank the ISMS organization for this opportunity to host this year's conference. The Finnish National Defense University has the privilege of being a pioneer, as we are now experiencing a virtual ISMS conference for the first time. Therefore, we now have the opportunity to test potential new working methods to improve the future conferences. As you well know, the ongoing pandemic has already changed the operating logic of the academic community in many profound ways. Firstly, and referring to the title of this year's conference, Open Data Movement has gained huge popularity. Nation states have mostly closed their borders during this year, whereas the scientific community has done exactly the opposite. Instead of virology, researchers have decided to share their data with the wide audience in order to do their best to help tackling the challenges posed by the pandemic. Secondly, a similar trend applies for scientific publications. The threshold for publishing has lowered. Researchers are publishing also rather scarce observations and very preliminary results in increasing amounts in order to face the common need for information. Furthermore, more and more studies are being published prior peer review process in public fora. This has already partly transferred quality control of research from our scientific community to the wider audience and media. Overall, the demand for new research has been huge, which obviously satisfies every individual researcher, of course. Thirdly, before the outburst of COVID pandemic, researchers used to exchange ideas mostly face-to-face in international conferences, including our ISMS. In the current circumstances, however, both research groups as well as interaction is nowadays virtual, and this will probably be the shape of things for some time. On the other hand, we are now more prone to contact directly persons we are unfamiliar with and willing to ask for their help. And for sure, I can say that is not very characteristic for us Finns. Only time will tell us which of these changes are permanent. We may expect, however, this will be the new normal for quite a long time. The ongoing circumstances has also further underlined that knowledge proceeded with a specific discipline or branch of science is sustainable only when it genuinely interacts with other disciplines and the wider community. This reinforces the relevance of scientific conferences, be they physical or this kind of virtual. Interaction, cooperation, and networking are the vital features of any scientific community. This applies as military scientists too. The annual International Society of Military Sciences Conference is an outstanding opportunity to get in contact with both like-minded people as well as colleagues from entirely different backgrounds. I urge you all to make the most of it. I sincerely hope that this conference will discuss all the different facets of the relationship between military sciences and open sciences and come up with a recommendation that will lead to a better shared understanding of the topic. Finally, once again, on behalf of the Finnish National Defense University, I welcome you all to this year's conference. I sincerely hope that you will find this conference both valuable and enjoyable. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my dear scientists, almost 1 year ago, we were gathering in Vienna, in Austria, for the ISMS conference on the theme of building the military sciences for the benefit of the society. At the end of the conference, I was welcoming you to Helsinki for this 12th ISMS Conference 2020. And this year's theme, as it is military sciences versus open sciences, continues the discussion what we had at the last year's conference. The world has dramatically changed during the past 12 months. I bet that nobody could have predicted last November at Vienna, the current situation. Even this year's May, we were discussing at the ISMS board whether we should have a traditional physical conference this time of the year, or should we have some kind of virtual conference. Our societies were practically closed during the spring 2020. We switched from the classroom-based education to the distant education practically over the night. That was applied from the primary schools all up to the universities, including our National Defense University. Surprisingly, the switch went quite smoothly. Well, the same thing happened also with the research. Most of the researchers continued their work at their homes, having only the electrical communication with the fellow researchers. That changed pretty much the way how we are doing the research. Like our rector was saying, it opens up our minds of making communication new ways. And officially, most of the research projects continued reasonably well. And since no traveling was possible, we had more time for writing papers. That sounds good. But everything looked fine. Well, when discussing with my fellow colleagues, the vice rectors of research, there were also some challenges what we found out. And one of those challenges was that do we have still the research community, the fellows to talk with? The researchers were suffering the loss of everyday informal communication, discussions, how to develop the ideas, strengthen the argumentation of the research and the research logic. And this situation actually is very much the same what we have in the military sciences. If we don't have a possibility of discussing with our researchers, then we are not capable of strengthening our arguments and strengthening our ideas. So in that sense, the new technology what we have has a possibility of changing the way how we are working, and thinking about this open science as an opportunity for strengthening also the military sciences. So in that sense, this year's theme, open sciences and military sciences, is it's hitting the point of today's challenges. This year has demonstrated also how the technology can be utilized to provide alternative ways of doing our things. This conference is a very good example of this. Personally, I see this conference as a learning experience, how the new technologies can be utilized for the future conferences as a hybrid solution. So we are benefiting both the new technology and also the face-to-face, which is very crucial also for communication. And these about examples, what I mentioned, we can't omit the face-to-face. So all the comments what you are having on the way how we organize the conference are welcome, because this will help us for developing the future ISMS conferences. And now it's my pleasure to invite our keynote speaker, Eeva Nyrovaara. Dr. Nyrovaara is working as a development manager at the organization called Universities of Finland, UNIFI. That is the cooperation organization of the Finnish universities, and it promotes higher education, research, and art by addressing far-fetching university-related issues. And it aims to influence Finnish higher education and research policy, and to promote common interest of universities, such as the open science. She has been a member of National Open Science and Research Steering Group, and she's participating, for example, the Open Science and Research Initiative project of the Ministry of Education and Culture to develop guidelines for promoting Finnish open science. This is the reason why we have invited Dr. Nyrovara to give keynote speech at our conference to enlighten us the current trends and discussion concerning about open science at the universities. And during the presentation, if you have any questions, you can use the Zoom to comments, and we'll gather the questions. So we have an opportunity of asking a few questions after the presentation. Eva, floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the National Defense University for inviting me to give this keynote speech. It is a pleasure always to talk about open science, as I've been working with it since 2013, and it is subject close to my heart. Can I have the presentation, please? Okay, the outline of the presentation is as follows. The general aim is to discuss the principles and goals of open science, especially in the university setting in Finland. I want to take you through how I define open science, so we know that we are discussing the same phenomena. And I also enlighten a little bit why open science is important, what are the grounds for it. Thirdly, I will go through a little bit about the open science goals in Finland, what are the open science policies here in Finland and how they are developed. Finland wants to be the leading country in terms of open science and the practices that we do. So that is something that I want to go through. There are also several cases against open science, and I will also discuss those, and I will make sure that I will leave time for questions at the end of my presentation. There seems to be some kind of trouble getting my presentation in the Zoom right now, but have I understood it correctly that you can already load my presentation from the conference site? Okay, so I just got confirmed that my presentation is for you to upload from the conference website, kind of the online area. So if I could please ask you, all the audience, to take up the presentation, and it'll be easier to follow it. I hope that we'll get the presentation up pretty soon here too, but it'll be easier for you to follow. So we are going to slide number 4, if you have that. And there's a slide about open science principles and practices. This is my aim to enlighten or open, so to speak, about what open science movement is about and what principles and practices there are to open science. The general aim of the open science movement is to make scientific research, data, and publications accessible to the scientific community and to the society at large. The principle behind open science is that open science is about increased transparency, reuse, participation, cooperation, accountability, and reproducibility. And open science aims to improve the quality and reliability of research. And open science is practiced through opening research publications, sharing data, opening notebooks, and general transparency in research. And these practices are something new to scientific community. Moving on, slide number 6. I'm not sure whether you can see that slide number 5. It states something about open access to research publications, but that is more for you as a background information of how open access to research publications is defined and different ways to open access. So that is more of a background information. Now moving on to slide number 6, which states that open science is nothing new. And here on this slide is my first take-home message. I claim that open science in principle is nothing new to science. Although it entails changes in a way that research process is conducted, the very principle behind of open science movement is the same that has reigned the production of scientific knowledge for a long time. The verification of research results entails transparency. Science is a social enterprise, and scientific work tends to be accepted by the scientific community when it has been confirmed. Although I claim that the principles behind open science are nothing new, I also note that new technologies, though especially digitalization, create new possibilities and for science, for transparency, and these practices are something new. Moving on to the section of why open science is important, and to slide number 8. First reason why a researcher, a research group should want to be open is that several research show that open science is associated with increases in citations, media attention, potential collaborators, job opportunities, and funding opportunities. And research articles that have been made open access are cited more often than those that have not. Okay, so moving on to the slide number 9 and to second reason why open access, open science is important. At the same time that open science helps researchers to gain citations and also visibility, open science helps also universities and other research performing institutions achieve global visibility and reputation. Okay, and moving on to slide number 10, and if I understand it correctly, next please, that's, yeah. So I hope that you all see my slides now. Yep, great, I got a thumbs up here. So third reason for open science being important is that traditional publishing models are expensive. Traditional publishing models and practices, the thing with this is that the at the time when the research results are available only for those who can afford to pay the access to the traditional publication channels. In other words, these publication channels are paywalled or behind a paywall. For example, the overall expenditure on subscriptions paid to all publishers by 26 European countries in 2019 was nearly 600 million euros. And the Finnish universities and research organizations pay about 35 million euros for electronic resources of scientific publishers. Even if research institutions and universities have paid so that their researchers can have access to these publishing channels, these journals, paywall journals, the larger audience cannot read research results published in these paywall journals. This also means that the scientific community itself is positioned undemocratically. Those researchers working in institutions who can afford the subscription fees have better access to research results than those working in institutions with less funds. As such, the traditional model adds to inequality. The open science movement and the overall discontent to the traditional publishing models has led to the research institutions and also some research publishers to seek new business models. Transformative agreements are an example of this. And transformative agreements are contracts negotiated between publishers and research institutions that transform the business model underlying the scholarly publishing journal model currently. So things are moving ahead, but slowly. Okay, next, please. Okay. Fourth reason is that research funders require openness. So basically, put it bluntly, if you want to get research funding, you will have to either opt for openness or explain why you cannot open your results, your publications. And Plan S is an example of an initiative in which research funders have put their forces together and decided that they will require scientists and researchers who benefit from state-funded research organizations and institutions to publish their work in open repositories or in journals that are available. And this is effective next year. Next, please. But although we have these reasons that are important for explanation why open science is important or why we should do it, I think that more importantly, we come again back to the basic principle of scientific endeavor. Open science is part of good scientific practice. And wider access to scientific facts and knowledge help researchers, innovators, and the public find and reuse data and check research results. Basically, open science offers better value, for example, EU research fund or any state research fund. And I think that the next point is really important. Open science encourages research actors across scientific field, and it is essential for solving today's complex societal challenges. combining different data, for example, can result in unexpected results. And I attended a conference a few years back where a scientist called the unexpectedness of open science crazy stuff. And crazy stuff motivated these scientists as it included the element of surprise. It is something combining two data sets from different sources. When done it properly, you can get something totally new out of it, something unexpected that will help solving today's complex societal challenges. Although crazy stuff might not be eloquently put, it is something that at least I've remembered ever since I heard. So I would encourage you to aim for crazy stuff in terms of openness. Okay, next, please. Thank you. So, as already mentioned, in both opening speeches, we are living amidst of pandemic. And as already indicated, the research community, the research publishers have all together recognized open research data as a key component of pandemic preparedness and response. And World Health Organization has stated that there is a need for timely sharing of even preliminary results of research data. It is also already indicated that there are certain challenges when the data is released before peer review, for example. And research community has taken it seriously, and Research Data Alliance, which constitutes experts of science, librarians, data scientists, and so forth, have made the community recommendations and guidelines on data sharing regarding research on COVID-19. So this is I think this is a great example of how research community uses open science and also corrects itself and tries to constantly improve the actions. Next, please. Climate change is another example where open science has a great meaning. Environmental and climate research relies on open data. And for example, the field's leading research infrastructure, ICOS, Integrated Carbon Observation System, states in its strategy that openness is one of its strategic roles and goals. And as such, scientists try to ensure optimal services for societies in their efforts to mitigate climate change. Next, please. So how all this has been and is promoted here in Finland. Open science policies are used for this promotion, and they are strategies and actions, aiming at promoting open science principles and acknowledging open science practices. And those policies are usually established by research performing institutions, research funders, governments, and publishers. And as I said, Finland has stated that it aims to be one of the leading countries, if not the leading country, in open science. Next, please. And next, please. Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland has been active and helped Finland to achieve its goal as the pioneering country or the best country in open science. And Ministry of Education and Culture has hosted several initiatives to support the research sector towards openness. And also openness is seen as key aspect in Vision for Higher Education and Research 2030 and Vision and Roadmap for the Research and Innovation Council in Finland. So there is a firm political support for open science in Finland. Next, please. The ministry's last initiative came to an end in 2017, and after that, UNIFI took a role to gather the research community together and discuss how to continue the work. Open Science and Data Action Plan was the result of that discussion, and it was published 2 years ago in May 2018. The action plan included 8 action points for the scientific community. I will not go through that because already in 2 years' time, we have moved on so fast, rather rapidly. But I point out one aspect of the data action plan that took us rather far. Next, please. Thank you. One of the action points was to form a national coordination body for open science here in Finland. And the Federation of Learned Societies took the lead for this. And it has gathered the whole research community and several actors to aim together to create a shared vision for open research community that everyone can contribute to in their own work. And next, please. Here's a coordination structure of the national coordination, and it is there are many layers to it. And although it may seem complex, the point is that there is a strategic group that makes the decisions, but in every phase in forming vision and certain open science policies in Finland, there are several expert groups producing the information in which the policies come. Next, please. And as a result of this cooperative work, the Finnish research community has jointly created a declaration for open science and research, and that was published last year. The vision states again the Finnish goal for being internationally forerunner in open science and research. And part of the task is to promote openness as fundamental value throughout the research community and its activities. So we get back again to the open science principles being part of the good scientific practice. And the vision will be supported by 4 policies that are at the moment in the making. Those policies are for open scholarship, open access, sharing data, and also open educational resources. Thank you. Next, please. The Ministry of Education and Culture has not forgotten us and is still steering open science, for example, through universities' core funding formula. Here's the university's picture of Finnish universities' core funding formula, which will be effect 2021-2024. And there you can see that there is extra credit, so to speak, for open access publications. Next, please. Next, please. There you go. There should be one slide in between. Oh, not necessary. No, that's okay. So basically, that's okay. Thank you. My mistake. I've hidden one slide in my own presentation and did not notice. Sorry about that. So basically, that means that openly available peer-reviewed articles, monographs, and edited works are 20% more rewarding to universities in terms of funding than publications that are not openly available. Next, please. Although the Finnish scientific community and the policymakers are accepting the principles of open science, there are still valid cases against open science that the research community has presented, and I will go through them here. Next, please. First, it is often said that open science requires extra work, and sometimes it does. Openness is not an accident. It is not something that just happens, or if it happens, you are doing something wrong. So open access is not an accident. It is always planned, and it is always part of your research life cycle. And it comes again back to the question of how open science principles being good scientific practice. Open science practices do take time and does require work. However, whether we call that work extra work or not depends on how we perceive the relevance of openness. If it is considered to be part of the good scientific practice, as I do, it is just work, just as any part of your research life cycle. And more universities provide services for researchers to help with this work. And so we are at the university sector trying to make the life of researchers easier and prevent accidents to happen. Next, please. Okay, here's another background slide for you. Let's go forward. Thank you. So the second argument against open science is that the current merit system does not recognize openness and the work put into it. Instead, the merit given to researchers has long depended on publishing in high quality paywalled journals. And what personally, I think that this is one of the core problems related to our system and why open science is sometimes hard to achieve. On individual level, this puts researchers between rock and a hard place. On one hand, one has to comply with organizational strategies and rules to publish openly and share data. On the other hand, the system that merits you based on paywall journal publications, it leads you to avoid openness. On the systemic and policy levels, it should be noted that research evaluation shapes and directs research. It is therefore important to consider how the researcher will be evaluated and what kind of research community will be created by the evaluation practices. I'm happy to say that in Finland, as in other European countries too, we are taking steps towards a merit system that acknowledges both quality and openness. And in September 2019, the Federation of Finnish Learned Societies initiated a working group to consider responsible research evaluation. As a result, recommendation for responsible evaluation of a researcher in Finland was published in February 2020. And the recommendation pays attention to the change needed in evaluation processes. Next, please. The third common claim against open science is that open science is not for all fields of science. Privacy, intellectual property rights, security reasons, and the fact that openness could jeopardize the project's main objectives are reasons used to oppose open science. And again, these are valid points. And the goal of open science is certainly not about violating these. However, the question is not about a field, but each research project should be evaluated individually. Could any part of that particular project in question be opened? For example, I give you two examples. In Finland, the method of locating the nesting places of endangered birds is open. Anyone can inform of such a finding through an online form, but the results remain closed for security reasons. A second example is that any research that involves personal data cannot be opened without anonymization. It can't be open, but strict measures must take place before opening. So my point is that even if one could not open any part of the project, one could use openly available methods or data or research publications by other researchers. So even if you cannot contribute to open science, you can benefit from it. Next, please. And here we come to the end of my presentation and my second take-home message. Open science is not a black and white issue. It is not either or. It is all about this slogan: be as open as possible and as closed as necessary. This picture is from Horizon 2020 guidelines, and it states that the research grantees have the right to opt out from sharing data, but they need to say why. So openness is the modus operandi, and if you have to opt out, you have to explain that, not explain openness. So again, as open as possible, as closed as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neurovara. Now it's time for a couple of questions, and we got the questions from the network. And let me try to phrase the questions what we had. The first question is related on this high-quality paywall journals for the better meritation of scientists. And we got a question related on that the researchers using these paywall journals because of the better peer reviews. And very often we consider that this open access is basically free of charge for everybody. And that's why if it is free of charge, maybe you don't get the best reviewers for the process. Is there something what we could do in order to improve also the quality of these open journals?
Thank you. That is a good question, and that is part of the kind of the discussion between open science versus so-called closed science. Important question. there are something that we call open peer review, and we can add that to the process, for example. And also there is a movement with the whole scientific community wanting to add quality peer review with open access. So we are working towards that. And also there's the fact that peer review is not something that two invited persons do when writing an article. It is something that the whole research community should do all the time. And that is one of the kind of, I guess I'm kind of going around the question, but that would be something that we have to remember, that peer review happens kind of all the time, and it is all not only those two people.
Yeah, it's also, of course, the meritation of the peer reviewers, that if you have a meritation for doing the very strict and critical peer reviews, that could be open also for these open science journals for better peer reviewers.
Exactly.
Because it's not only that you are doing it voluntarily with no benefits, but you will have a benefit of being a peer reviewer.
Exactly.
And, at least my case, I'm usually very strict when I'm doing the peer reviews, because I put my own reputation there.
Exactly.
And in some cases, like the doctoral dissertation, the peer reviews are known. So if I'm writing a statement that yes, this is acceptable, then I put my reputation there. And that could be one way of also.
Exactly. That is true.
Yeah. The second question is related on the open science, and the person who was asking is using a term malicious research. So thinking about the military sciences and the security, that if we are opening up our research results and ideas, that also is open for these bad guys, the malicious research. So is that in a way endangering the research, what we are doing, and our capabilities of keeping the society safe if we are opening too much of the research?
Well, without going too much into military sciences, which are not my expertise, I would say that openness is actually a guarantee for some kind of safety. We can see in, for example, Finland, there was a large data breakage, so to speak. A lot of private information was spread around, and the community is kind of attacking the bad guys. And again, the scientific community will kind of come into your rescue into help. And the scientific community, if it gets the openly known, they will openly also come and correct misinterpretations, for example. This is without going too much in the military sciences.
You also, there was a question related, you mentioned on your slides that there are certain areas where the open sciences are not fully possible, like the medical and involving research with the minors and business collaboration, product development, and also the military sciences. What would you have, what's your recommendation or the learning experience of the other sciences? What the military science should look, the best practices? We are very often talking about best practices. What kind of best practices you tell us from the medical or from the business side? That what things what we could do, open up our research, even with these threats what we mentioned earlier?
Well, again, going back to at the end of my presentation, I kind of referred to cutting your research project into smaller parts and looking at those. And for example, methods are widely shared, and the same methods can be used in different fields of science, and that method can apply to different set of data. And for example, there I would presume that military sciences would be able to use the methods complied in other scientific fields without compromising the data. So basically, for example, this is not giving an example of a certain field of science, but kind of giving example of how to use the methods of developed by different fields of sciences.
There was also one question related to the language. That has there been a discussion about different languages, and does that bring some kind of barriers for researchers? Because taking as an example Finnish language, there's only 5 million people capable of understanding it. And if we are publishing in Finnish, is that the barrier which is in a way preventing of the science going as fast as possible? Or vice versa, if everybody is writing in English, is that good either? So what is the national development if everything is only written in English?
That is an excellent question, and there is a if you look up in Google, there is a Helsinki initiative that is launched by the Finnish Society for Learned Sciences, and UNIFI is also taking part of it. We are promoting science for national languages, also for English. So I would say that do both. It is important to write scientific papers in different languages. That is the only way that the language develops. We need new terms, and if the national languages do not have terms or words for new scientific developments, it is harder for a great public to use those or enjoy the fruits of science or research.
Yeah, the last final question is related to the human psychology. Are we, as researchers, are we in a way open for the criticism? Because that's sometimes when we're discussing, especially in our university, that if I put my things in publicly available, I might get some criticism. And very often people don't like getting critics of the work what they have done. So is that some way a challenge for the researchers of learning to utilize as a beneficial part of the criticism?
That again, a good question. Good question, and probably that will hinder us to take the criticism. But at the same time, I would say that if you cannot accept well-formulated criticism, then you should consider moving to a different career. Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you are in this field, then bring it on.
I think that's one thing which is very hard for the military people very often, that if they get the criticism, well, there's different ways of getting the critics. But if you have a constructive critic, that's a beneficial for both. So it's a learning experience for both the persons who is getting the critics and also the one who is giving. And that's, I think that's something what we have to learn also in the military sciences, that if you're writing a paper and get the comments, that its idea is that the comments will improve your work, not that they say that you are doing something wrong.
Exactly, and it is about your work, not about your person as a whole. And I would also like to kind of say that we talk about research process. So the paper is not probably, hopefully, the end of the research. Even the doctoral dissertation is not end, it's part of the process. So there's always chance to continue.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we are talking in our university, that we are generating knowledge.
Exactly.
And the knowledge is inside the heads, and you have to share the knowledge with others so that they will learn also your knowledge.
Exactly.
And exchange it. So if I'm giving my knowledge to you and giving to your mine, then we both have more than beforehand. So thank you very much again, Dr. Neuramara, and we'll continue on the process, and the conference will continue as follows. We shall have a short break. Unfortunately, we can't offer you the coffee and the refreshments. You have to make your coffee by yourself. We will continue in parallel working groups starting at 13:30 the Central European time. The first sessions, what we will have, we have 7 working groups in parallel. The working group 1, the war studies, working group 4, leadership, command and control, the basic competencies. The working group 6, the security and defense policies. Working group 7, armed forces and society. And working group 8, defense and management and economics. Working group 9, the military education. And working group 11, COVID impacts on the military. Each of these parallel working groups are using their own Zoom virtual channels that will be the same for the entire duration of the conference. And you will find those working group online video channels on those respective web pages of the working groups. The working group chairs or their deputies will steer the activities on those working groups. And after this first set of parallel sessions, another break, short break, we shall gather together for a daily wrap-up session at the 1800 Central European time. This session will be held on this virtual main auditorium channel. So it's the same channel what we are at the moment. And for the working group chairs or their deputies, I would like to ask that they would prepare a short wrap-up of their sessions and findings to be raised for the general audience. And similar sessions will be held also tomorrow. So with these instructions, I'm welcoming you to the conference and see you in the parallel session starting 13:30 Central European time. And feel free to visit various working groups and participate actively on the discussions. Thank you and see you later.